everyone. I'm Maria Vazquez, and I'm an Equal Justice Works Disaster Resilience Fellow and attorney at the Cabrini Center for Immigrant Legal Assistance at Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Thank you for joining us today for our Immigration and Disaster session. We're excited to bring you this training as part of the first ever Disaster Resilience Awareness Month. Throughout the month of March, Catholic Charities is teaming up with its partner, Equal Justice Works, to spread awareness about disaster-related legal challenges and share resources for disaster preparedness and recovery efforts on this page. This session is being recorded, so if you need to leave early for any reason, you can always visit this page to access the recording. You can also reach out to us directly and we will send you a link to the recording. So we can go and get ahead and get started. I'm joined here by Jill Campbell, Director of Immigration and Citizenship at Baker Ripley, and Katie Atkis, Disaster Resilience Manager at the Houston Immigration Legal Services Collaborative. So in this Facebook Live, we're going to be sharing information to assist immigrants in the disaster recovery process. And as we all know, disasters can cause destruction of property, loss of financial resources, and personal injury. However, during this times of crisis, the immigrant community is especially vulnerable because of their immigration status, language barriers, and sometimes lack of access to resources for various reasons. So this question and answer session is going to provide useful information to assist immigrant individuals in the disaster preparation, recovery, and resilience process. So we're going to go ahead and start off this Q&A session by speaking to Jill. Jill, can you share with us a little bit about your work at Baker Ripley?
Hi, thank you for having me. I direct the Immigration and Citizenship Program at Baker Ripley. Baker Ripley is a Houston nonprofit. We do community development, which includes serving neighbors across the region and everything from adult education to tax preparation, charter schools, and our Immigration and Citizenship Program. Our program focuses on providing legal services and social services to immigrants who are trying to fight their deportation or find a pathway to permanent legal status here in the United States. Baker Ripley also does a fair amount of disaster work, notably right now under COVID, helping with direct assistance through the city and county and apartment rental assistance. And also during environmental disasters, we try to help with basic needs and emergency services.
You guys do a lot of great work. Thank you. So moving on to the disaster questions. Jill, one of the biggest barriers that I have seen for immigrants who are attempting to recover from disasters is losing their immigration documents in the disaster. It can be anything from court notices, USCIS notices, old passports and entry documents, to most importantly, their EADs, employment authorization cards, their green cards, their legal permanent resident cards, and their naturalization certificates, which are proof of their status in the United States. And these documents, as you and I know, become especially necessary to the recovery process because most of the time, in order to renew certain benefits like retirement, SNAP, SSI, or disability benefits, individuals need to prove their status. So what can individuals do to prepare for disasters and to prepare for, having these documents in hand?
Yeah, so we're all pretty fortunate these days that most people, or maybe someone we know, has a smartphone. And so my recommendation for any important immigration documents, always, whether we're preparing for a disaster or not, is take out your smartphone, open up the camera app, snap a picture of those important documents, and then email them to yourself or to someone that you trust that has an email address. That way, these documents are always going to live inside the cloud or inside of your email account, and you can access it and pull down those documents anytime that you need. Sometimes even if you snap a picture but it saves on your phone, well, what if your phone is stolen or also destroyed in a natural disaster? So setting it up into an email address is the best way you could eventually recover that. Really, really important for documents like your green card, your I-94, which is a little slip of paper that you might have gotten if you entered with a visitor visa. Now I-94s are electronic, so you can get them from the CBP website. But back in the day, it was a little white slip of paper to show that you entered lawfully into the United States. Those are really difficult to replace, sometimes impossible to replace. So I always recommend snapping a picture of the front, a picture of the back, emailing it to yourself or to the person that's very close to you that you trust a lot with personal documents and personally identifying information. And so that way it can be recovered. Keep a copy handy in somewhere that's safe, somewhere that you think might be resistant to floods or storms. Sometimes I tell people, like, put a copy in your car if you're going to be evacuating, and then keep a copy at your house so that no matter what happens, if car is destroyed, but house is fine, you'll have a copy somewhere. So keeping all of those immigration documents, copies of them in a safe place is really important so that you can have at least a copy. The reason is because if you have to replace those original documents, the process with immigration will go a lot quicker if you have a copy of that original document. We have to file formal paperwork in order to replace our immigration documentation. For example, to replace a green card, it's the form I-90. And we want that to go very quickly so you can get your new green card. You need your green card a lot of times if you want to apply for a new job or if you need to travel internationally. And that green card replacement process can be a minimum of 6 months of waiting. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a very long process. So we want to have a copy on hand so that you can use that to try to get your benefits after a disaster, or you can try to make the I-90 process go faster. You can replace your citizenship certificate. Again, that could take a minimum of 6 months. So important to have a copy on hand. None of these processes with immigration are fast, unfortunately. You know, it's such an urgent need after a storm to replace documentation, but immigration very rarely will hustle to help you out. If you are replacing documents, you can ask for what's called expedited processing of your case and citing a natural disaster. It's worked sometimes, it doesn't work all the time, so it's not something that's a guaranteed help. So definitely keeping those documents on hand. But always remember that even if you don't possess your actual physical document, for example, you don't possess your green card, it's gone, or your DACA work permit, if that's gone, that doesn't mean that your status itself has been terminated. It doesn't mean the status itself has been lost. You still have your lawful status here in the United States. It's just that your document lawful status is not physically with you. So there shouldn't ever be any fear in at least trying to engage with these government agencies to get your benefits and saying, here's my name, my date of birth, my alien number, here's a copy of my green card or a copy of my work permit, at least trying that. You should never be afraid to avail yourself to the help of the government if you've lost your documents.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, definitely those applications to replace documents can take a really long time. I've had in my work applications to replace green cards take almost a year. And you're trying to move on, you know, recover from this disaster, move on with your life. Maybe you lost your job, find a new job, renew your driver's license, and all of that, you know, is going to be affected if you unfortunately don't have a copy of that. So always make sure to quickly find an immigration attorney that can help you do that as soon as you lose that document and are able to. So
and it costs money too, right?
yeah. Oh, yes.
And so that's the frustrating part about it. But a lot of these applications have fee waivers, so you can ask the government to waive your fee. You do have to prove your income when you're trying to get these fees waived. So we always recommend, no matter what, make sure you're filing your taxes. Yes. So you always have that proof of income, so that if you need to ask the Homeland Security to waive your fees, you can use your tax return as a proof of your income.
Yes, that's a really good point, Jill, because those things, the fee waiver approvals have gotten a lot harder, and if you don't have proof of your income, like, you know, your tax return, it's really tough to get a fee waiver. So thank you. Another one of the most commonly asked questions during consultations with clients following a disaster is if receiving emergency relief assistance can make an individual inadmissible under public charge. Is that true?
So that's not true. I know that public charge is a hot topic right now in the immigrant community because there was a significant change to the public charge rule last year under the prior federal administration. So it is true that public charge rules have gotten a lot stricter in the last year. They are citing to other benefits that previously weren't listed in public charge as benefits that could potentially exclude you from being able to apply for permanent residency. But it's always been clear in all administrations, including this last one, including with the new rule change, that emergency assistance from a disaster will not be held against you for the purposes of public charge. For COVID also, receiving COVID testing, COVID treatment, COVID vaccination, it's specifically listed on the USCIS Department of Homeland Security website that it will not be held against you for the purpose of public charge. The government is very explicit and very clear that you should seek emergency services. It will not be held against you for public charge. One thing that we do want to advise the community of is that when you are filling out applications for benefits, maybe it's for FEMA or for disaster SNAP benefits, emergency food stamps, make sure that you're putting all of the truthful information on those applications. Make sure you're being honest about who lives in the house, income in the household, damages that happened, and you're not misrepresenting or being untruthful on those applications, because information on that application can be vetted, looked at very closely. And if it's not truthful, then you can get in trouble criminally. And you don't want any criminal issues because that could impact your green card case later down the road. It's also really important to remember that the public charge rule only applies to a certain group of individuals in our community. To people who are trying to get their green card through a family member or through employment. The public charge rule is not even applied to people who already have their green cards, asylum seekers, refugees, someone applying for DACA. The public charge rule is not used in those cases. So it's really important, if we are worried about public charge and signing up for any sort of benefits, before even thinking about, does this benefit impact me on public charge or not? Have a lawyer tell you whether or not the public charge rule even applies to you. For most people, public charge rule doesn't even matter. We're also hoping that we're going to see some changes in the public charge rule very, very shortly. About 2 weeks ago, the President Biden said that he's going to take the next 60 days to review the public charge rule and possibly propose changes to it so that it won't be as severe and harmful to our community.
That was a lot of great information on public charge. Thank you. What about unemployment? We get this question a lot also. If an individual has a work permit and lost their job as a result of a federally declared disaster, can they collect unemployment?
So unemployment is not a benefit, it's a right. You pay into unemployment when you work at your job. And so if you are unemployed, it's your right to apply for those benefits to help support yourself and your family through the tough times. So I can't speak to other states, but in Texas, in order to get unemployment, you do have to be work authorized. So meaning you have to have a work permit or some sort of immigration status that allows you to work legally. You have to have that work permit or permission to work throughout the time of your employment and then at the time that you're applying for and collecting unemployment. As long as you are work authorized and you meet the other requirements for unemployment in Texas, then you should be able to get unemployment. Unemployment is not held against you for public charges. Remember, it's not a benefit, it's a right. So unemployment won't impact a future green card case. So we encourage community members who have been working with authorized status and who are unemployed to go ahead and apply for unemployment.
Okay. And are there any particular immigration issues that can arise during a disaster that could lead to individuals potentially obtaining a legal status? And if there are, what are the eligibility requirements for this?
You know, being a victim of a natural disaster in the United States doesn't entitle someone to the ability to apply for legal status. But let's talk about other types of programs under immigration law that address people who have been victimized. The world in which we're living, which seems to be like lots of disasters going on, right? COVID on top of winter storm, on top of hurricane seasons, is, so there are special visas for people who have been the victims of serious crimes and have been harmed because of those crimes, and who help law enforcement investigate those crimes. It's called a U visa. There's also a visa for individuals who have been the victim of sex trafficking or labor trafficking. It's called a T visa. And so a lot of times after a disaster, we might see the exploitation of community members and the victimization of community members in workplaces. If you're being physically, sexually abused, or you're being trafficked at your workplace, you might be eligible for one of these special types of visas if you work with law enforcement or the Department of Labor. And if you've been the victim of domestic violence or sexual abuse at any time and you've helped law enforcement, you could be eligible for a U visa. And other types of serious crimes, such as aggravated assault with a weapon, if you've ever been held up at gunpoint, or other types of serious felony assaults. Anytime someone is victimized to that level and they don't have immigration status and they're helping law enforcement, they could be eligible for one of these visas, the U visa or the T visa.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question I wanted to ask, what if, let's say, someone has, a court date, an immigration court date, a fingerprint appointment, or maybe an interview at USCIS, and then, hurricane comes. Where can individuals find announcements and updated information regarding office closures for this?
I know this is the biggest headache of all, because immigration is federal, which means that it's people up in Washington, D.C. calling the shots and closing down offices and things like that. And so sometimes it's like you feel like these federal offices are the last ones to close or update the community on what's going on. You'll hear about, okay, well, our local county courthouses are closed, and you see the mayor on the TV and he's telling you about school closures, and everyone's updating you on information. You're like, well, what about these immigration buildings? What about my fingerprinting appointment tomorrow? We're kind of the last ones to hear about things that are important to us. The best thing, I know this sounds crazy, but this is the only reason I have a Twitter account, is because that seems to be the first place that Homeland Security, EOIR, which is the Immigration Court, USCIS, that seems to be the first place that they send out updates is on their Twitter accounts. So it's about looking up EOIR, USCIS. Those are the two here locally. But we don't want to rely on Twitter. So if it's court, call the 800 number first to see if your court date has changed or been updated. That's 1-800-898-7180. You put in your alien number and you can hear if there's changes to your court. You can also call your local court. You can go online to eoir.gov, find your local courthouse and call. There's someone that's supposed to answer the phone. So I would recommend calling as many times as possible. If for court cases, actually for all of this, I would document every time that you're calling and trying to find out about your case. Do a screenshot of that you've called the courthouse, do a screenshot on your phone and save that proof. If you have a lawyer, update your lawyer, that you're trying, or have your lawyer try to, to communicate with you what is going on. But what happens with lawyers, hey, they're in the middle of a natural disaster too. So sometimes their internet may not work, right? And so, we can't always respond in the way that we want to. We try to communicate with clients, but sometimes it's impossible. For USCIS, they have a customer service phone number. I don't have it memorized. 1-800-325. We'll look it up. We'll give it to you.
I'll look it up.
You can call the 800 number, or you can go to uscis.gov to something that's called a case status check. Plug in your receipt notice, and it might tell you if your maybe your oath ceremony was scheduled, and it will say your oath ceremony was canceled. You'll get a reschedule notice, or the website might say your interview is canceled. You'll get a reschedule notice. Try to not drive in perilous conditions if it's really bad, if everything else is shutting down. And usually we won't get those updates on those federal buildings until, the morning of. Oh, the 1-800 number for USCIS is 1-800-375-5283. So you can call and try to get a status on your case from there. Typically, these federal buildings are going to close down if the state and county buildings are closing down, but sometimes they don't. So don't assume that things are canceled. For fingerprinting notices, if you have a lawyer, always talk to your lawyer. I always have my clients try and go once that disaster is over with. Just try to show up on a date you're not scheduled for and show them your notice. Sometimes they'll let you in and fingerprint you. Sometimes they'll say wait until your new notice comes in the mail. Let's see, that's court, USCIS, fingerprinting, and ICE check-ins. So many of our community members have to do a yearly check-in with ICE at 126 North Point Drive, a little bit like in Northeast Houston near the airport. And that's separate from court. Remember, your check-in with ICE is usually because of an order of supervision with ICE, or maybe you even have an ankle bracelet that you have to wear and you have to do those check-ins. It's really important to try to call the phone number as many times as possible to get a rescheduled date with ICE, and to not stop calling for days afterwards until you are able to reach an ICE officer. So they will sometimes want you to come in immediately after a disaster, or they'll want to talk to you on the phone and then schedule you for your next year's appointment. But that's really, really important, because ICE could consider not hearing from you as non-compliance, which means that they want to use that to try to enforce your deportation, or to try to detain you or harass you or question you. So it's really important to not stop calling with ICE until you've reached them.
Yeah, thank you for making that distinction between ICE check-ins and immigration court, because we get so many clients who are confused about that, and it can, have a really negative effect on your case and your situation if you're not aware of the difference. So thank you for that. Are there any other helpful tips or information you would like to share?
Tax season is on. Like I said, doing your taxes is great. You can go to bakerripley.org to learn about the 11 tax centers that we have going on for this season. And I think there was just recently a tax deadline extension because of the storm as well. I don't know what the new date is, but they're going to give Houstonians more time and Texans more time to file taxes. So make sure you're getting your taxes done. And then Baker Ripley's apartment rental assistance program is also open. It opened yesterday, the 25th. So we're encouraging people to go to that website, and I need to get that for you exactly because I haven't memorized that one yet. Do we have that one? Did you find that one, Katie?
Katie's on it.
Harris County, what is it? Make sure I get that one. To apply for rental assistance, your rent assistance can cover previous months as far back as April of 2020. So we encourage individuals to apply for that benefit as well. There we go. Let me find that website.
And I think that tax deadline got moved for Texans, I think up to June. I'm not sure the exact date, but I do think it's sometime in June. So that's
HoustonHarrisHelp.org, right?
Yes.
Yeah. HoustonHarrisHelp.org is now the main website. So definitely get your taxes done, apply for rental assistance. Yeah, and that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Jill. You shared a lot of great information. And now we're going to switch over and hear from Katie Vazquez from Houston Immigration Legal Services Collaborative, who's going to chat with us about community resources for immigrants facing natural disasters, and also share some local resources for us. So Katie, do you want to share with us a little bit about the amazing work that you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. So I'm Katie Vazquez. I'm the Disaster Resiliency Manager for HILSC, Houston Immigration Legal Services Collaborative. And as our name suggests, we're a collaborative of more than 40 organizations that provide immigration legal services and also social services to immigrants. So we serve as like a hub, a connector. We do a lot of advocacy, and we basically find solutions that our partners are, to problems that our partners are facing when their clients are coming to them. So we try to address those and work stronger together. So we started our disaster resiliency work after Harvey, like everyone else, and we did to be able to continue it and continue to build on the work that we did then, and really develop some really good systems for people here in Houston. So yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of that work.
Thank you. So to start off our questions for you, what types of federal assistance is generally available to individuals following a natural disaster?
So it really depends. What we're looking for is a disaster declaration from the president. So usually the governor will request it, and once the president makes a disaster declaration, then the federal resources open up. It's important to note that with these resources, they are, the eligibility requires that you're either a US citizen, what they call a qualified alien, and non-citizen, this is really complicated language, Jill, do you know? Non-citizen national. So that means like, you were born in one of the US territories, but you're not a citizen of the US. So qualified aliens includes people with green cards, refugees and asylees, and other people that are in the country legally, have a legal status, but aren't necessarily, they may be on the path to citizenship, but they aren't yet citizens. However, people without legal status in the United States are eligible to apply for these funds through a household member, including a child under 18 who does fit those requirements of either US citizen, non-citizen national, or qualified alien. And as Jill mentioned, none of these are subject to public charge, and it's really important that you're just 100% honest on any application. So the type of help that's available, you usually have 60 days from the date of the disaster declaration to apply for assistance. So I believe that's April 20th for the most recent winter freeze. And you can apply to all the programs, whether you have insurance, but you certainly shouldn't wait on private insurance before applying. You want to make sure that you get in before the deadline. So the first type is FEMA. Everyone's heard of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or at least anyone who lives in a disaster zone. So Houston, we know FEMA all too well. And what FEMA will help with is temporary housing. So they'll pay for a hotel while you're making home repairs. They'll pay for up to, or at least 1 month's rent if you have to relocate. They will pay for home repairs to make your house safe and livable. They have different standards of this than I do. So we're seeing people recovering from Harvey still with out sheetrock or with incomplete floors. So safe and livable is, subject to interpretation. They'll replace some personal belongings that were damaged by the disaster, whether it be a car or clothes or furniture, appliances, that type of thing. And then they might provide medical expenses or funeral, transportation, other serious needs that, again, were caused by the disaster. What's really important is that you only use the money for what FEMA has given it to you for. It may be really tempting to use it for food or for medications because these are really urgent needs and may be more urgent than home repairs. But if you use that for other purposes, you will have to repay the money to FEMA. So it's important not only that you use the money as approved, but also that you keep receipts for up to 3 years. You've used it for that purpose. But the first thing you want to do before applying for FEMA is just take photos of the damage, make a list of the items that you're going to include in your claim, and then you can apply online or by phone or through a community-based organization like Baker Ripley provides. There's a lot of organizations that help people apply for FEMA. Another type of assistance that's available is small business administration loans. So if you're denied by FEMA, you may be referred to the SBA, and they give low interest loans to renters and homeowners. Despite the name of business in SBA, they actually do provide renters and homeowners loans to make repairs or replace your home, or for some of the other things that FEMA would cover. They'll also sometimes pay for upgrades to your house in order to protect it from future disasters. So they see that as an investment that's worth that. So let's see, what else about SBA? That's pretty much it about SBA. The third federal assistance that may be available for some disasters, Jill mentioned earlier, and it's the Disaster Supplemental Nutrition Program. So it's a nutrition assistance program, so it's DSNAP. So that may be available following some disasters. I have not seen any information about availability after the winter freeze. Right. But for example, after Harvey or some of the other floods that we've had since then, so the many other floods we've had since then, they've made DSNAP available. So it's short-term food assistance that's designed to help you restock your pantry and your fridge after a disaster. So this will be, you know, a short time infusion to help you build up your pantry again. So to be eligible, you have to be from a county that has been declared in a disaster zone. You have to have experienced a loss of income or disaster-related expenses. You cannot have been enrolled in the regular SNAP program at the time of the disaster. And then there's also some income limits that you have to meet. I mentioned that DSNAP didn't kick in after the winter freeze, but something that did kick in was an extra amount of money. It's a percentage on top of regular SNAP benefits that is helping people restock after the winter freeze. So it was kind of a workaround that's not DSNAP specifically, but it's helping people that already receive SNAP benefits. Winter freeze, SNAP beneficiaries are able to purchase hot and prepared foods in the grocery store, which usually is not allowed because of the higher price, but because a lot of people weren't able to cook or prepare foods at home, wash dishes, then they're able to get those prepared foods now, and that goes through March 31st. So yeah, those are pretty much the federal programs that kick in after a disaster.
That was a lot of great information, and I'm sure it's not fun owing FEMA money. That's got to be terrible. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So, Katie, where can individuals find information regarding community resources that may be available to them in their area?
So I have to say that my favorite source is the Houston Chronicle. I think local newspapers are really good, and if you have internet, editions are usually updated regularly. So again, using the winter freezes as an example, the Houston Chronicle kept updated lists of shelters and warming centers, of school closures, of boil water notices, of water and food distribution centers. So there's a lot of really good information there. Also, and you want to be really careful with how you use social media. Jill mentioned this earlier. There's a lot of rumors flying around on social media, so don't take everything you read just at face value, but from a reliable source, from the city of Houston or the Harris County government or the Houston Chronicle, or sources that you can rely on. There's a lot of great information out there on Twitter as well. What I find beneficial about Twitter versus like the local paper is that you get a lot of grassroots resources too. So there's this new mutual aid movement that's happening. And so it's not charity, it's people helping people. And there's no qualifications and, oh, we only help, people that were born on a Sunday during the full moon. Like, they help everybody that needs help. And so some of the more kind of official resource list that you might consult looking for assistance might not have these grassroots agencies. So those are really good too. But definitely never, ever, ever call a number, give anyone your bank account information or your social security number, or your credit card number, anything like that. There was a FEMA scam that happened again during the winter. Pay for a hotel room, you know, just give us this information. And so we were trying to like counter that. That went around on Twitter. So you have to be careful with the source. You have to be careful of what you're showing up for, but there's a lot of good information there too. 211 is also a great source. That's United Way's helpline. It's a great way to find social services or legal services. Again, they kind of have the more formal stuff usually. And a lot of times, because they get such a high volume of calls, that the services they're referring to have really long backlogs. So if you call 211, like make sure that you're finding out what is the wait time, and always have a plan B. You know, if you're waiting on fresh water and you're waiting for example, Crowdsource Rescue to come and bring you fresh water, like you might want to look at the water distribution list too, because Crowdsource Rescue has a really, really long list of people to serve. And then the city of Houston has their 311 line, and most local governments do. And that's a great place to find out about city services. So if if there's a water main broken, or a water fountain in a park is leaking, or something like that, you can call 311 and report it. It's really, really important that people do not use 911 if they have a water burst or need information or things like that, because these are for emergency, life-threatening emergencies. And when we load their call system with these important matters, urgent matters, but not life-threatening matters, then they don't have the bandwidth to serve the people whose lives are really in the balance in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I know also that HILSC has a really good portal with information on Houston resources. Do you want to just share that? You can share the website, or you can walk us through it if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, if I could do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, let me allow you to. I didn't realize I didn't do that before. You should be able to now.
Okay, great. So that's actually the emergency rental assistance program that Jill mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. But this is HILSC's website. It's houstonimmigration.org. So it's really easy to find. And when you go to our homepage, there is a rotating banner. I think the first thing that comes up when you get here is actually a link to our disaster resource guide. But if you miss it off the banner, you can go, there it is. So you can go to our disaster resources for immigrants page. And there's a lot of great resources here. There's a COVID-19 webinar series. There's information about policies. There's resources for advocates and disaster recovery resources, legal assistance, data reports, white papers if you're looking for information about past disasters. But this is the money right here. This is where you're going to find all of your services. This is this disaster resource guide. We set it up on Google Docs because we really want it to be an open source. And so anyone can contribute information to this, and really we rely on people contributing information in order to make it work. We update it regularly, but the more people that contribute, the more resources we all have. So you can see there's different categories. We have something for winter freeze recovery, and we have information down here about COVID. Probably the most active thing right now in COVID is under health. It's testing and vaccines, and we regularly update that information. But because this is specifically for immigrants and immigrant advocates, we have a lot of the information that Jill was talking about. Under immigration related issues, we have the information about the courts. We have links to find more information about that. about ankle monitors. What do you do if there's a power outage, numbers to call. And as Jill mentioned, it's really important just to make sure that you're taking photos and documenting each time you call and what happened when you called. Like, was there no answer? Did you get put on hold for a year and a half? Like, what happened? But we try to create these big categories that help people find the resources they need. So there's stuff around home repair. The city and county, and actually the city, county, and state are all asking people that they report damage to their homes so that we can understand overall how much damage has happened to our city, and make a case to FEMA for potentially more resources, renters' rights, and all sorts of information here, including the scams we talked about earlier. So how to hire a contractor and make sure that you have a really good contract set up. So this is here for your use, at your disposal. Please add to it, and access it anytime. Spread the word far and wide.
Thank you. That's great. Well, thank you, ladies. This concludes our Q&A session. And again, thank you, ladies, for the helpful information that you shared today. We hope that this information can make easier and facilitate the disaster recovery process for immigrant communities. Again, this session was recorded. So if you would like to access this information again, feel free to come back to this page and visit again so you can listen to it again. Thank you so much.